Hello, Bill.
Hello, Erik. It's good to see you again.
Very good to see you.
We
too.
get to see each other once a year, whether we need to or not.
That's true. We are today in Paris. This is your first time here?
It is. I have never been here before. My first experience. Philip says, "When was the last time you were in Paris?" I said, 5 minutes ago.
Very good. You've been a little bit over 1 week in Luxembourg.
That's right.
To teach a workshop about
The logical thinking process. That's right.
How was it?
It was, as most of these courses are, it was very interesting because the variation in the audience and because they weren't quite sure what they were signing up for when they came in. They had some idea, but it turned out to be, for some of them, a lot different than they thought that they were going to see.
I have participated to your workshop
Yes.
in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
It was very good, and I remember something you did the first day, the first
Mhm.
hour probably, when we were in the workshop, was for us to present what you were going to teach us.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very good because even though I had an idea of what we were going to have as a result, I didn't know what we would go through.
Okay.
Could you make that presentation again?
I'd be happy to. I usually start with asking the participants what their objectives are for the course. What do they hope to realize it? And the way I ask it is, why is it you're here in these seats right now? What do you expect to get out of this? And they all come to pretty much the same outcome, which is they're here to learn how to do the logical thinking process for the purpose of solving problems. Specifically problems that they are already aware that they have within their organizations. And after we find out what all of their objectives are, I tell them what my objectives are for the course. And unfortunately, if you will, my objectives take priority over theirs because I know something that they don't know about the course, and that is that it is not likely that they are going to be able to completely solve a real world problem by using this methodology in the space of the time that we have in the course. So I tell them that my objectives are twofold for the course. The first is that by the time the 6 days are over, they will leave the course completely self-sufficient in the logical thinking process, meaning they can go back and build competent logic trees without having to have me or anyone else standing over their shoulders to tell them what they're doing wrong. And the second objective is that they get a head start, and I emphasize head start, on solving a real world problem. And I do that because I want them to learn on a problem that has meaning for them, something they're vitally interested in. And I think that that will actually improve their motivation, shall we say, to study and learn. But I also recognize that they can't possibly get these trees to finished product condition in the space of time that we have, because we have too much material to cover. Originally, when I learned to do this, we went to a course that was 10 days long, and it went 10 hours a day. There was 100 hours in a 2-week period.
Must have been tiring as a teacher.
It was totally exhausting, and I managed over the years to figure out how to get even more material down, compressed into 5.5 days. And I did that with a combination of books to read and things to practice on. But the point is that even in 6 days, 5.5 days, it's not possible to do a finished product job on the logic trees. The best you can do is demonstrate that you understand and can function independently on your own, and then go back to your place of work or your home and practice at home and develop the practice that's necessary for success. So those are my two objectives for the students. First of all is self-sufficiency in the logical thinking process. And then the second is a good head start on completing a complete systems analysis on a problem, a real-world system problem that is bothering them and is maybe giving their companies a hard time. So what I typically do is I'll start the first day with an overview of the thinking process. And this usually takes about an hour to go through all of the tools and give examples of each one. And then by the time we do the introductions and the course objectives and the overview of the thinking process, the morning is pretty well done at that part. And then usually early in the afternoon, I will start with a direct presentation on the goal tree and explain how the goal tree is used to establish the benchmark for everything that should be happening within the organization. And it is against that benchmark then that the rest of the tools are applied to basically close the gap between what should be happening and what is happening in the organization. That usually takes about 2 hours, about 30 minutes for me to do the presentation, and about an hour and a half for the students to actually go through and construct a goal tree of their own. Then usually what will happen is we'll be pretty close to the end of the day by that time, but if not, we'll start on the categories of legitimate reservation, which are the rules of sufficiency logic. And these are absolutely critical to the success of anybody who wants to learn and apply successfully the thinking process. I would say that those two things that we cover on the first day, the categories of legitimate reservation and the goal tree, are probably the two most important parts of the thinking process.
Could you explain a little bit what those categories of legitimate reservations are?
Certainly. These were developed by Goldratt when he started putting together the thinking process. And they are actually, if you will, the rules of logic against which you compare the logical connections in your logic trees to determine whether they are robust and whether they are actually sufficient, whether the logic makes sense.
Okay.
And there are 8 of these rules. I think we have another video somewhere here where we've gone over what those 8 were. But
those are the rules to follow,
the rules
to check that you are logic.
Right. Well, you use the rules in 2 ways. You start with the rules in building your logic tree so that you construct a tree that is supposedly logical to begin with. And then after it's done, you examine your work with those same rules to make sure that you have, in fact, not overlooked any or you're following those rules. Okay. And nominally, if you can, you get someone else to look at your work using those same rules and evaluating what you've done by using the same rules that you used to construct to make sure that you have, in fact, followed the rules. So that's usually what happens at the end of the first day and normally into the second day. This takes a long time. I would say we probably spend at least a good half day on the categories of legitimate reservation because it is crucial that people know and understand what those rules are and how to apply them. And naturally, when somebody finishes that section, they think they know what it is, but they don't really understand it until they have to actually thrash with it in building the trees and find out where they've made the mistakes. So that usually takes us pretty well through the first day and probably half of the second day. And we start in with the current reality tree, which is the first of 2 logic trees that use cause and effect sufficiency. And these are the 2 that the categories of legitimate reservation most directly apply to. The current reality tree is designed to compare what actually is going on in the world with the benchmark that you've established in the goal tree. And you build a tree that has at the top of it undesirable effects, which are statements of the size and the nature of the gap between the desired benchmark and reality. And you work your way down through a logical chain of cause and effect to the critical root causes that are producing those undesired effects. So that's what that kind of a tree is. Now, when I went through this program, it took us 3 days to build a current reality tree, and even at that, some people weren't quite finished with it yet. I've figured out how to compress the learning in this so that we can get it done in about a day. And if they're really good, maybe in about 4 to 5 hours.
Okay.
And that usually takes us through the second day and possibly partially into the third day, depending on how fast the students are at learning. In the second half of the third day, I teach the evaporating cloud, which is the methodology we use for resolving conflict, systemic conflict. And that takes about a half a day, maybe 3 hours. I think it can be done in about 3 hours. Then we take a break for the weekend. People need that break because thinking is hard work. That's why so few people do it. That was Henry Ford that said that. And by the end of the third day, their head is full and they needed to relax and unwind a little bit. So we start the fourth day. Usually it's a Monday. We'll start with the future reality tree, and it takes about a day to put the future reality tree together, including the negative branches that go with it. And this is the logic tree that describes the solution for closing the gaps that were identified in the current reality tree.
Okay.
At the end of that day, if we are not finished with the future reality tree, we'll spend part of the fifth day on that. On the fifth day, we go into the prerequisite tree. And prerequisite trees are intended to execute the actions that you have decided to use in the future reality tree to solve the problems that you identified in the current reality tree. At some point, conceptual problem solving has to end and practical problem solving has to begin. And it's the implementation of the actions in the prerequisite tree that will allow the change to take place in the organization to, one would hope, improve.
So would you say that you're going from the trees to the actions you're going to implement?
That's right. And the whole thinking process is designed to start with an ill-defined problem of some sort and end up with a fully implemented solution to that problem and go all through the analysis steps in between. And then at the end of the fifth day, the students all have a complete set of trees. Maybe complete is a little bit, maybe a little bit ambitious. They usually have a complete goal tree, evaporating cloud, and prerequisite trees. They probably have a complete future reality tree, although they may not have all the negative branches that go with it. And they generally have a complete current reality tree, but some don't quite have that finished before we have to move on to the next tool. However, by the time the fifth day is over, the participants are, to my satisfaction, independently sufficient in the knowledge of the tree that they can take it back and continue it. I typically offer in my courses what I refer to as a lifetime service contract. My lifetime, not theirs. And the idea there is that if they have anything they need a refreshment on, or if they need some advice because they're not sure, they don't really remember something from the course, they're welcome to contact me and I'll bring them back up to speed. And to the extent that my schedule allows, I will even scrutinize some of the trees that they've built and offer constructive comments. That's the 5 days. And the last day we don't do any trees at all. The last day, the half day, I work on change management. In other words, it's insufficient to construct a logic tree and expect somebody to look at it and just appreciate it and say, that's great, let's do it. things don't work that way in real life.
No.
So typically what we'll do is I'll talk to them about the reasons why people resist change and what can be done to overcome it. And the reasons I go into are very, very well steeped in psychology. I give them a little Psychology 101 on security, satisfaction, and change management, and the motivations that cause people to want to resist getting out of their comfort zone and maybe making new changes to their lives or to their companies. That takes usually about a half a day, and I spend part of that time showing them how they can take these super complicated current and future reality trees that they've built and reduce them into a very streamlined form that I refer to as executive summary trees. And the executive summary trees are designed to get the message of change across to an executive in 15 minutes, 20 minutes at most. The objective is to get a favorable decision out of the executive without boring them to tears with pedagogical detail. And so I show them how to do that. And I finally conclude with about an hour to discuss the idea of complex systems, complexity, and how the thinking process can be used to come to grips at least a little bit with complexity. And so the last day is really devoted to the idea that now that you know this logical thinking process, these are the pitfalls to avoid, and this is how you apply it when you get out in the real world to maximize your chances of success. And that's really where the agenda goes in 5.5 days. It's intensive, but by the time they're over, they are usually in agreement that they will never quite see the world in the same way again.
I believe that, because I've gone through it, and I can confirm your eyes are probably open from before, but after that they see things differently.
Yes, absolutely.
And just to say a word about what you mentioned, that you have a lifelong service, after sales service.
Yes,
as you mentioned,
Right.
I can say it's not only marketing advertisement. It's true, for having had the chance to get some
That's right.
some help from you on
That's right.
trees that I've built after the workshop.
And in point of fact, just the day that I left to come to Luxembourg, actually it was the day I arrived in Luxembourg, I got an email message from a guy who owns a company in Minnesota in the United States, and he had come through my course in 2010, and he wrote a very brief but desperate letter, or an email message to me, and he said, "Bill, I'm in desperate need of a refresher. What can we do?" And I said, "Well, right now, nothing, because I'm halfway around the world from where you are." But I said, whenever it's at your convenience, if you want, we can either try to do it by long distance, through the internet, go to meeting or something like that. Or if you want to come on back out, you can go through it again. No extra charge.
Very nice. Thank you, Bill, for this presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.